Hello, I'm Earl Taylor, Chief Marketing Officer at the Marketing Science Institute. As many of you know, nonprofit MSI serves as the bridge between marketing theory and business practice, and our goal is to move the needle on significant marketing problems. We do this by funding research by leading academics worldwide on topics voted by our corporate sponsors and disseminating that research through members-only events and a variety of publications. I'm very pleased to welcome you to another MSI For Members by Members webinar. This is a series of webinars on subjects related to MSI's current research priority topics. First, I'd like to point out the Chat with Presenter function in the left-hand corner of your screen. Please use this feature to send through any questions you have for Tony or John during the presentation. We'll gather the questions and have a brief Q&A session following the presentation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's featured speakers. Tony Ulwick is founder and CEO of Strategyn, and Jon Dome is manager of customer roadmap at Harte Hanks, one of MSI's newest corporate sponsors. And we're delighted to have them here today to talk about jobs to be done and the buyer's journey. Tony Ulwick is the founder and CEO of Strategyn and a pioneer of his jobs to be done methodology and outcome-driven innovation process, a patented methodology that yields a new product success rate that is 5 times the industry average. Tony's methodologies boast an exceptional 2-decade track record helping the world's most advanced companies reinvent underperforming products, successfully deliver and enter new markets, and build and implement company-wide innovation programs. Jon Dome is manager customer roadmap at Harte Hanks. He has a demonstrated leadership in building and sustaining high-performing client satisfaction teams. He's a motivational team builder, an articulate communicator, and he excels at establishing relationships and creating customer-centric culture. Jon has leveraged the jobs to be done methodologies popularized by Tony Ulwick to create a new way of looking at how marketers should look at optimizing their buyer's journey. Every journey starts with the question, what job is my customer trying to hire for? So with that, I'll turn it over to Tony and John, and we'll come back at the end for some Q&A. Tony?
Tony, you might be on mute. Little check here. Tony, I think you might be on mute.
Oh, there we go. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Earl, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I appreciate that. For those of you who Strategyn, let me just take a few seconds to introduce ourselves. We've been in space for about 25 years as of last October. We've worked for dozens of Fortune 100 companies, B2B, B2C, and we've applied a process that we call outcome-driven innovation. It's based on the theory that people buy products to get a job done. And that's what we'll be talking about in the first half of this presentation. And then the second half, where John will be talking about the application of this to the buyer's journey. So with that, let's get started. The problem that we've been trying to solve for 25 years is the problem of innovation and failed product failures. And one of the first products I worked on in my career was at IBM. It's called the PC Junior. And the day after we introduced that product, the headlines in the Wall Street Journal read, "The PC Junior is a flop." And unfortunately, they were right. It was a flop. It was a billion-dollar failure. And although it was quite humiliating, it certainly did get me very interested in innovation as a process. And what we've spent a lot of time over the past 25 years is to figure out how to mitigate the risk of failure in the innovation process. Now, obviously, innovation is pretty complex, but what we've been trying to do is to simplify the process. And at a high level, it is rather simple what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is come up with products and services that address unmet customer needs. So that's pretty straightforward. So when a team is in the room together, R&D, marketing, sales, development, there's great motivation amongst the team to figure out what solutions should we produce to address the customer's unmet needs? And it's pretty rare that our clients lack ideas. They usually have lots of ideas, but there is a problem associated with the process. And that problem is when everyone's sitting in a room, there isn't agreement on what types of needs exist, what a need is, and how they're structured, and how they should be used as inputs into the innovation process. So to solve this problem, we've taken a little different approach. Instead of focusing on products or customers, the goal is to understand the underlying process that people are hiring their products for. This comes from thinking. Instead of focusing on the drill, the product, let's focus on the underlying process people are trying to execute. Now, the beauty of this is once you think of it from that perspective, you can start applying Six Sigma type principles to innovation, and you can break down that underlying process into its discrete process steps and figure out from customers how do they measure success as they go through that process. And those measures that they use, metrics they use to measure success as they go through getting the process executed are their needs. And if we can discover those metrics and figure out how to get the job done better, we can create better products and services. So at a high level, that's the theory behind it. And what we're trying to do here, for example, let's say we're to talk to a group of interventional cardiologists who are focused on having blood flow to a clogged artery, for example. So we could talk to those interventional cardiologists, break down that process into its component parts, understand all these different metrics they use to measure success and value as they go through that process. We can figure out which of those are relevant to them and which are poorly underserved given the products that they're using today. So from that we can identify where they're struggling to get the job done. From that point on, we can start thinking through different solutions that could get the job done significantly better. This is essentially what we're trying to do. We're trying to make innovation more predictable by building a model that allows us to test ideas to see how much better they'll get the job done. And those products that get the job done or will get the job done a lot better are those that go into product development. So this is exactly what we did with Cordis Corporation. This is one of our first successes back in 1991, where we looked at restoring blood flow in the blocked artery. And after going through discovering the opportunities, the Cordis team came up with 19 new products, all of which became number 1 or 2 in the marketplace, increasing their market share quite dramatically. So we've had a number of successes over the years. A lot of those are documented in several books and articles that we've written over time. And we also introduced our thinking to Craig Christensen back in 1999, who wrote about it in his book, The Innovator's Solution, and talked about it as the jobs to be done theory. And since that time, that nomenclature has really stuck. And in his latest book, Competing Against Luck, he talks about jobs theory again and as a means to make innovation more predictable. The process that we've developed to create predictable innovation looks like this. It begins with understanding what is that job that the customer is trying to get done, and then understanding those metrics they use to measure success and value as they get that job done. And the third piece is to determine which of those needs are underserved and or overserved. And we call this predictive data because we know today that if we can create a product that will address today's unmet needs, it will be the winning product of the future. The process is to discover what we call hidden segments of opportunity. And we say they're hidden because if you segment using demographics or psychographics or attitudinal or behavioral characteristics, you won't find these segments. And the way we discover them is to segment around unmet, because at a very high level, where companies struggle with innovation is determining what a need is, what the needs are, which are unmet, and are there different segments of customers with unique unmet needs. And if we can't agree on what a need is, of course, it's really hard to segment the market around those unmet needs. And once we have all those insights, then we can start aligning our products with those market opportunities, find holes in our product line, create new value propositions, and create new products and services that will get the job done better. So let me just take you through a brief example of the approach. So it begins with defining the market around the job to be done. And in this example here, you could be the kettle maker, for example, And if you went out to your customers to find out, why are you hiring my product? Well, they might say, well, we're hiring it to boil water. Well, that would be true, but it's really missing the bigger picture. Boiling water is just an ingredient in a bigger process, which is to prepare a hot beverage for consumption. And so you could go along thinking that you're getting the entire job done when in fact you're just getting a piece of the job done. And this is what we see in a lot of markets. Most products that are out there today are just getting parts of a job done, but not the entire job done on a single platform. And if we can discover what that entire job is and work towards creating a platform level solution that will get that job done significantly better, then we're working dominating a given market, like Espresso has, for example. To do this, we create a job map. We want to understand what that job is and break down the job into its component, figure out where people are struggling to get the job done. We've written an article about this in HBR back in 2008 that you could reference if you like. But the reason we do this is we're trying to figure out the entire job from beginning to end that the customer is trying to execute, so we can start plotting a way to get the entire job done over time. And it lays out a really nice solid vision, unwavering vision for the organization, because a lot of these jobs aren't going to be solved in the first or second iteration of a product. It may take years or even decades to get the entire job done on a single platform. But if we know the target, the chances of getting there, of course, become dramatically higher. So this is a simplified job map for the job of preparing a hot beverage for consumption. This leads way to what we call the jobs to be done needs framework. Yes, people are buying a product to get a job done, and we can break that process down into its component parts and then begin to understand how do people measure success and value in getting the job done. And what we see here on the bottom is what we call a desired outcome statement. This is the way we define a need. It's a metric people use to measure value in getting the job done. And we've done a lot of experimentation on this over the years, running a variety of experiments to figure out what is the best way to construct these statements to get discriminating responses from customers while we're prioritizing these opportunities. And it's led to statements that look like this. Now, the interesting thing about the needs framework is that it goes beyond this core job that customers are trying to get done, because we also know that they might be trying to get other jobs done. As they're getting the core job done of preparing a hot beverage for consumption, maybe there's other jobs they're trying to get done as well. And knowing what those jobs are is important, because if you can create a solution that gets multiple jobs done as opposed to just one single job, then you're creating significantly more value for the customer. It could essentially replace other products. So knowing what those related jobs are is critical. There's also a set of emotional jobs that we focus on. And knowing how people want to be perceived by their peers and how they want to feel as a result of executing these jobs is really important information when you begin to position your products in the marketplace and develop a value proposition. So uncovering those also becomes a critical component. The next piece is what we call consumption chain jobs. Many products have to be purchased, they're received, they're installed, they're set up. You have to learn how to use them, interface with them, transport, so on. Now, people aren't buying products, of course, so they can clean them and maintain them and dispose of them. They're buying them to get this core functional job done. A lot of the conversation companies will have with customers often relates around these consumption chain jobs, and the discussion about the core functional job often goes unsaid. The third piece, or the final piece over here on the far right, is the financial metrics that the buyer uses to decide whether they want to purchase from vendor A or vendor B, or purchase product A or product B. And interestingly, in many cases, the buyer and the user are different people. So we need a value proposition in a way to appeal to the buyer that might be very different than the value prop that we would use to appeal to the user of the product. But yet they have to connect together. And what we've discovered over time is that these functional metrics that people use to measure value have a cost component to them. So understanding how those functional improvements can impact these financial metrics really leads to a nice aligned value proposition between the buyer and the user. Now, what we've learned is that in many companies that have been in markets for years, they have all this information available to them in the minds of a lot of their employees, but there's no one place where they're all organized together. So when people get in a room to decide what solutions should we go pursue, they're debating a lot of these points. They're debating which of these needs are actual needs and which ones are underserved. But by having the framework, now we can have a method by which we can organize our thoughts. And instead of nobody knowing all the customer's needs, we can create a framework so everybody agrees on all the customer's needs. The next step in the approach then is to figure out, well, which of these needs are unmet? And for that, we do rely on quantitative research. Qualitative research doesn't provide the level of detail that's needed to figure out, of all these 100+ different needs, which ones are really important and underserved in the marketplace. So having a survey that goes out to 3 or 4 or 500 people or more is a critical part of the process. And what we ask them is to tell us how important each outcome is, and then using the solution that you have today, how satisfied are you with your ability to achieve that particular outcome? And what this points out is the strengths and weaknesses of the products that exist and where the opportunities exist for improvement. We enjoy laying these out on what we call an opportunity landscape. And the reason we do this is you can see importance over here and satisfaction here. We're trying to figure out which of these needs are underserved and which needs are overserved. And we're defining unmet as a need that's very important but not well satisfied by the solutions that exist today. And this one dot over here, with the crosshairs, you can see that 81% of the population is saying this is very important, yet only 30% is saying it's very satisfied. And anything in this gray area over here to the right is what we call an unmet need. It's underserved. And anything in this far left area, the lighter gray, we can say it's overserved. And when we think about innovation, we're trying to create products that get the job done better, satisfying these needs on the right to a greater degree, and more cheaply, which would be reducing costs in these areas over to the far left. Now, the vast me here, of course, is what are the chances of your team randomly coming up with a solution that addresses these 15 or so unmet needs if they don't agree that those are the unmet needs, or they're unsure as to what the unmet needs even are? And of course, the answer is very low. But if we flip that around and say, how long would it take them to come up with solutions that address these unmet needs if they all agree on this? Well, we've had teams work for 3 hours or even less to come up with solutions that address those needs effectively once they know what they are. And this is really the key part of the approach. There's one other important element as well, which gets into discovering if there's segments of customers with different unmet needs. And the only way to do that is to actually segment the market around these unmet needs. So what we're looking for using factor analysis are the variables that people disagree on. In other words, are there some outcomes that half the market thinks are really important and unsatisfied, and the other half thinks are really unimportant and very satisfied? Well, once we know what those are, we can run cluster analysis around them and discover segments of customers that have very different unmet needs. Then we can figure out who they are and why they exist. Now, this is a critical part of the process because we could be targeting customers or phantom segments that could really lead us to failure. So, for example, we may want to execute a disruptive strategy and go after a segment of customers that are overserved and come up with a cheaper product that gets the job done worse. But if that segment doesn't exist, in other words, if there isn't an overserved segment, then that strategy is certainly going to fail in the marketplace. By the same token, we may want to pursue a differentiated strategy and come up with a solution that gets the job done significantly better and charge more and try to pursue a profit share strategy. But if that overserved segment doesn't exist, then the chances of being successful pursuing the market with that strategy, of course, are minimal. So the goal is to figure out, of all the segments that do exist, which ones do you want to target to create the most value for. This is where the process is really focused, is to discover those hidden segments of opportunity and those needs within that segment that are highly underserved. And if we can do that, then we can be much more successful in the marketplace, bringing predictability to innovation. And so the premise is pretty simple. If we don't know the target that we're trying to hit and we're guessing at it and failing fast and so on, we may never get there. But if we take the time to figure out exactly where the customer is underserved and we know just what target we're trying to hit, then the chance of hitting the target go up dramatically. Now, the work that we did with Jon and Harte Hanks focused on the buyer's journey. And just to put that in perspective here, the buyer's journey really relates to the first step in the consumption chain job, where people purchase products and services. And what we did in this case is to break down that purchase job and really study it in great level of detail, understanding the needs, how people measure value when they purchase products, and to discover opportunities there. And what Jon will do, picking up from here, is to discuss what that looked like and the ramifications of what we discovered.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. So before we jump into how we applied Tony's work to the consumption job or the purchase job, was what we call the buyer's journey, let's take a step back and frame the problem statement real quick. Over the last 10 years or so, we've really seen a trend in consumer empowerment. And it starts with the rapid explosion of increased product choices. It was actually the CEO of MasterCard last week that said that 75% of brands can disappear and nobody can notice. So the result of that is we have dozens of different options for many of the products that we purchase today. In addition to the increased product choices, we have an increased number of channels that we can purchase products from. You can purchase a product from your mobile phone when you're sitting in a meeting. You can purchase products from your laptop as you're sitting at your kitchen table. You can even buy a product from a guy named Dave down the street via Craigslist. And you can even go the old-fashioned route and buy something from a brick-and-mortar store. And because of this increased product choices and increased channels, consumers are now much more active in their research than they were 10 years ago. There's a rating and a score for everything. Me personally, I don't watch a movie without checking out what the rating is on Rotten Tomatoes. And we're even socialized to like our friends' pictures on Facebook and Instagram and share Twitter feeds, right? We're being socialized to rate all of our products and services. We see this evident in Amazon's review process. And the result is this well-informed consumer. They realize that they have an abundant amount of products to choose from. They can buy it from multiple channels, and they have a wealth of information to go out there and search for their products. So in addition to that, this evolution of the buyer's journey, what we realize is that understanding this portion of the customer experience is becoming increasingly important. We took a study done by Kim Whitler, who's on MSI, when she was at David's Bridal, and the study was essentially new brides that were entering the buyer journey went on the David's Bridal website, and they registered online for information from David's Bridal. David's Bridal's put together a response or a strategy in 4 different categories. Apologize for the small font there, but I'll read them out to you. And the email campaign, the 4-strategy email campaign was, the first group was a sort of a litmus test, right? That was the control group. They didn't send any email to this group of brides-to-be. The second group, they sent them a promotional message. This is a sales opportunity, 20% off coupon if you buy your dress in the next 2 weeks. And then third group, they sent an emotional message, right? Talking about how beautiful your wedding is going to be. You're going to be the most beautiful bride. And then the fourth group, they sent the brides tips and trends on weddings in 2016, for example, right? What is the hottest new look? What is the hottest trends for your groomsmen and your bridesmaids? And after they executed this test email campaign, what they found out, interestingly enough, is that sending them tips and trends, sending an email on tips and trends, resulted in the greatest purchase and the greatest revenue at the end of the buyer's journey. And this makes sense. This is a high involvement purchase. This is a very high considered purchase where brides, they're hoping that this is going to be their only time they ever have to go through this process, and they don't know a lot about it. And they're at the very beginning of their journey, and they're looking to build trust with somebody. And further evidence is, in last place was the sales promotion message. So sending them a message right off the bat saying, hey, if you come in the store, you'll get 20% off, actually did worse than not sending them an email communication at all. And why is this important? Because if you take this more well-empowered, informed consumer, they're receiving messages in email and direct mail. When they go into the store, sales associates are talking to them. And if you don't understand your buyer's journey, you run the risk of alienating your consumer, and you run the risk of lost revenue. And that's the lens that we took, and that's the lens that we realized that we needed to better understand. What is this job of the buyer's journey? What is really going on here? And by getting it wrong, we really run the risk of alienating our customer base and run the risk of lost revenue. So we applied Strategyn and Tony's outcome-driven innovation process to the buyer's journey. We sampled just under 600 consumers across many retailers that you're probably very familiar with: Macy's, Kohl's, Home Depot, and Amazon. And after we sat down, we surveyed these consumers using Tony's approach. What we discovered is that there's essentially five stages in the buyer's journey. Right, so if you talk to Tony, referenced the job map, referencing the different stages of the job, we broke them into the 5 stages of the buyer's journey, recognizing that the first stage is recognizing that I have a problem to solve. Then I'm going to go out, I'm going to do information search, that's that well-informed consumer. I'm going to evaluate the different options that I have. And ultimately, then I'm going to go purchase the product. I might purchase it online. I might go into the store. And then the last phase is that post-purchase evaluation, and that's I'm going to get the product at home. I'm going to try it. I'm going to use it. I'm going to decide if this met all the ways I evaluated it and hoped it would solve the job that I was hoping it to accomplish in the first place. And I'm going to share that. I'm going to share that experience. I'm going to share it online. I'm going to tell my friends at work. I'm going to tell my colleagues in the office. Right. So we start with this 5 stages of the buyer's journey. Now we're going to dig a bit deeper and get more specific with it. So within those 5 stages, what we discovered is that there's actually 15 discrete steps of the buyer's journey. Right? These are 15 discrete steps that each consumer will go through. Now I'll preface this with this really applies to considered purchases. Right? This is when I'm going through the buyer's journey and I am looking for a product that either I have not purchased before or I don't know a lot about. It could be I'm buying an automobile, it could be buying a suit for an occasion. But I'm going through these very specific steps of I'm recognizing I have a problem. I'm going to go through a phase of looking for information of how to solve this problem, and then ultimately travel through the journey, buy the product, and then share the experience. So why is this important that we broke it in from a 5-stage journey, which many of you have seen, many marketers have seen different approaches to breaking the buyer's journey into stages, but why is it this important to break it into 15 distinct steps? Well, these 15 distinct steps now inform us of what type of content to deliver to consumers. So as we saw in the David's Bridal example, when you send a sales promotion message when the bride-to-be was in an information search part of the buyer's journey and they're trying to build loyalty with the brand, you run the risk of alienating the consumer. So to understand what part of the journey they're in, you must first understand what is the consumer trying to solve within each one of those steps. And once we understand what they're trying to solve in each one of those steps, then we can identify where they are in the journey, and then we can best appropriately align content to deliver to them and help them in their journey. The goal here, the way we looked at this is buyers are going through this journey to solve a problem, right? To hire a product or service to get a job done. And as marketers, we should be helping them along that journey, not trying to tell them what to purchase or how to purchase. We should be helping them and pulling them along the journey. Furthermore, as Tony had outlined, within each one of these 15 steps, I won't spend a lot of time here, but we also discovered that there's roughly 130 different outcomes that consumers will measure or use metrics of success for each one of those stages. And this becomes really important for us to identify what part of the journey is underserved, right? What part of the journey do consumers find to be very important, and which part of the journey do they find that they're not very satisfied in? And out of that, what we realized is that not all buyers are alike. There are 15 steps to this journey, and there are 15 stages, but each buyer goes through that journey a little bit differently. Each buyer puts a little bit different importance on the information search phase or the evaluation phase. And what determines that importance or satisfaction are what we call unique complexity variables, right? And what we decided to do was to try to understand what those complexity variables are that will determine whether I'm going to put value in this information search phase or if I'm going to put value in evaluating different product choices. So when we tested the model, what we found is that traditional segmentation models or methods were found to be completely ineffective. So looking at gender, looking at income, looking at generation, age, did not explain differences in the journey. So whether I'm a male or a female, it didn't explain if I put importance on the information search phase or the evaluation phase. Whether we were talking to somebody who was a high earner or a low earner relative to income, didn't explain how they go through the journey and how they place importance and satisfaction on each stage of this journey. So the team took a step back and asked the question, so if traditional segmentation methods, which have been commonly used in marketing for years, are not explaining how individuals are traveling through the journey, what does explain the differences in the journey? And what we concluded was that the two variables that explain the differences is time and budget. So how time and budget constrained an individual is will determine their level of importance and satisfaction throughout the journey. And this graph represents the segmentation that we found to exist within the buyer's journey. We found three distinct groups. And what those three distinct groups are, if we look at segment A here on the left, these are the buyers who don't have a time constraint, who don't have a budget constraint. They're looking to solve a problem, but they don't feel rushed through the buyer's journey. On the other side, you have your segment C buyer. These individuals feel very rushed through the buyer's journey, right? These segment C buyers have very little time available for shopping. They are time constrained and their purchases are very urgent. The interesting thing about this is just because I'm a C buyer doesn't mean I'm always a C buyer. And this is an important classification that we want to make sure that we get across, is that time and budget explains how I'm going to approach and purchase a product, but sometimes I may be a journey C buyer, or sometimes I may be a journey A buyer. And if let's say I'm a retailer, I need to understand that, and I need to be prepared for all different types of buyers. And what we found is that when we look at the various segments, the journey C buyer is underserved. So the retail environment, the online environment, when we looked at the individuals who had plenty of time and plenty of budget, were rather satisfied with the journey that online purchases and brick and mortar purchases provided them. But it was in that journey C buyer where they were underserved. So some examples of where we found that the journey C buyer is underserved, and an example of how a retailer or a product organization might solve this unique problem. So what we found is that this journey C buyer feels rushed through the journey, and they feel as if they have to make a purchase really quickly, and they end up buying something and they have buyer's remorse. So one way to solve this is to allow a journey with a reduced number of choice options. Now, I put this picture, this is the infamous Bed Bath & Beyond wall that never ends of towels, right? This is a journey C nightmare, right? If I have to walk into a store and I need to purchase something quickly, dinner has to be on the table in 30 minutes. I got to pick the kids up from soccer practice, and I have to stop and I have to check this off my list and buy some towels because my old towels are smelling like mildew, and the family's complaining about it. And I walk up to this wall that never ends, and I'm overwhelmed, right? I don't know where to begin. So an example of how to solve this would be to provide an end cap that simply says, here's our top 3 best-selling towels, or here's our most functional towels, and give a description about it, right? So provide an out for this journey C buyer that gives them a reduced number of choices. And essentially what we're doing here is reducing the anxiety that you present to them by giving them a million options. Now the journey A buyer, they may like all the options because they can browse around the store, they can pick up the towels, they can talk to somebody about them. But that journey C buyer, you're giving them a lot of anxiety by starting the journey off with a million different options. The second example is bringing expertise into the buyer's journey. And this is a picture of some REI sales associates that they do an excellent job at this. I don't know how many of you our REI customers, but if you ever wanted to get into any outdoor sports or outdoor activity and you didn't know anything about it, you could walk into an REI store and the sales associate will educate you on what you need to know, what you need to learn, what type of equipment you're going to need, and you will leave the store feeling as if you are very confident in your purchase and that you're an expert in what you're going to go after, right? So employing and bringing expertise into the journey will help this Journey C buyer, will help them with that anxiety of feeling rushed through where they don't have time to go out there and read the reviews online and go to blogs and understand what the experts are saying. Put somebody there in the journey to help them along, or even give them, combining the previous example of reducing choices, here's the choices that our experts believe are the best choice. You see that often online where here's our editor's picks, right? So bring that expertise into the buyer's journey and help that Journey C buyer along the journey and give them confidence in their purchase. And the last idea that we found is give these Journey C buyers assurance of easy returns. And what that essentially means is if I'm a Journey C buyer, many times I come into the buyer's journey, I don't have a lot of time to make a purchase, I don't have a lot of time to research, and ultimately there's a key moment in time where I'm going to decide to buy this or not buy this. And if I have the insurance that when I get home, that if it doesn't meet the needs that I set out for it to meet, then I'm going to have that buyer's remorse. But if I know that if I can easily just swing by the store and drop it off or put it in a box and send it back, that I don't have to worry about the hassle of returning it, then it's going to increase the likelihood that I'm actually going to go to that next step in the buyer's journey, that purchase phase. So I'm going to move from evaluation on to purchase. So just by promoting, and many retailers actually have, when we research this, many retailers have a very good return policy, but they don't promote it, right? And what we're not saying is that you should promote people from returning your product. What we're saying is give that Journey C buyer the assurance that if something does go wrong, they can come back and return the product. So recapping, right, when we talk about I call it the quartet of messaging to our consumers, understanding the buyer's journey, what we've determined is an extremely important part of purchasing a product. It helps inform delivering your message to the right person at the right time in the right channel. So with that concludes my portion of it. I'm going to hand it off to Earl. He's going to kick off the question and answer part of the section.
That's great. Thanks, John, and thanks, Tony. Excellent. Covered a lot of material in very crisp fashion. We appreciate that. We did have some questions that came in during both of your presentations, so let me sort of address those in sequence, and then we'll see if we get others as we go. Tony, first for you, there was a question from William about midway through the presentation about how you actually come up with a list of unmet needs, and that frankly relates to something that occurred to me too, which is, do consumers sort of know they have unmet needs, or is this something that you discover through the process you described? In other words, famously people said no one needed an iPad or an iPhone until they saw one, and Apple claims that they bring products to market before consumers know that they have to have them. So maybe a little bit more about what you mean by an unmet need, how you discover that. Is it something that customers or consumers themselves can articulate, or how do you get around that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, customers don't know what solutions they want, right? And so when we hear the statement that people, customers don't know what they want, well, they don't know what solutions they want, but they sure know what jobs they're trying to get done, and they certainly know how they measure success and value as they go in an attempt to get those jobs done. So we never ask them about solutions. This is why we focus on the underlying job. And the way we capture these needs, we typically do it with customers. It could be one-on-one or a small group. But we begin by creating the job map. Well, actually, we begin by defining what the job is from their perspective. And once we have that, then we create the job map. And only after we have that map do we begin going step by step and ask people to take us through their journey on that step. And how are they measuring value as they're trying to make their way through that artery, or as they're trying to open up the artery? And they have very specific metrics that they're using. Like they say, well, as I'm trying to do this, I want to make sure that as I'm going through the vessel and it turns and twists, that I don't perforate the artery and cause damage. All right. So what we would say then is what you're trying to do is minimize the likelihood that you damage an artery to a tortuous vessel. And they would say, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And so what we're doing is we're listening, right? We're not asking lots of questions. We're listening how they break down that process and how they think about success every step of the way. And a complete set of needs would be from beginning to end in chronological order, if you will, everything they're going through and everything they're measuring from beginning to end to get the entire job done perfectly. So if you could satisfy all those needs, they'd have the job done perfectly. But at that stage, then we just define what a need is. When we talk about what the unmet needs are, we don't go to each individual and ask them, what are your unmet needs? What we do is we put out that broader survey to 300 or 400, 500, 600 people, and we ask a statistically balanced sample of people to tell us how important each need is and how satisfied they are given the product they're using. And from our statistical work, then we can calculate which needs are unmet. So that's hopefully that's clarified.
Thanks. That's great. That's a great distinction, obviously, between consumers knowing what they need as opposed to how to get there. And we'll come back to that in a moment in terms of the decision journey that Jon shared with us. I think there are a couple of related questions that have come in just now. One of our listeners was asking about how you distinguish or how you do this in the commoditized categories. I mean, it's one thing, for very high involvement brands and products that you discussed, but some of these, presumably some of the people in the audience are actually marketing managers for more commodity type products. Does this process still apply there? And the same person, Subhash, asked also to say a little bit more about the link between the emotional and functional aspects of understanding the job to be done.
Yeah, that's another great question, and it is more of a struggle when you're dealing with commodity-type products. And this is why understanding the other types of needs becomes critical. A commodity product becomes a commodity because it's providing limited function, and once that function is provided, you can't really get the job done that much better. So it becomes a commodity from that perspective. But it doesn't mean that they're trying to get other jobs done in conjunction with that. So that's why understanding the related jobs becomes critical. And it doesn't mean that they don't have emotional jobs that might be underserved. So understanding what the emotional jobs are becomes critical as well. And also the consumption elements. A lot of commodity-type products begin differentiating by making it easier to buy the product or open it or store it or transport it or those types of things that relate to the consumption chain element. So knowing that those options exist offers you more opportunities for differentiating the marketplace, even if it is a commodity product. We worked with Bosch to help them into the North American circular saw market. And circular saw has been around for 80 years, and this is back in the early 2000s. It appeared to be a commodity-type market. And it's just simply cutting wood in a straight line, which seems like a pretty simple process. But the way we segmented our market, we found a group of people that struggled more than everyone else to get the job done because they had to make more angle cuts and they had to change the height of the blade more frequently. And because they did, they had 14 unmet needs that nobody else had. And once we presented those 14 unmet needs to the Bosch team, it took them just 3 hours to conceptualize the CS20 circular saw, which became the best-selling circular saw in the North American market for about 10 years. So even something that seems like a commodity, by analyzing it through this, you can identify opportunities along some of those dimensions that could win you shelf space.
That's great. That's a great example, and I think there are other examples in marketing history where what everyone assumed was a commodity, chickens or something. Along comes Frank Perdue and brands and decommoditizes his product. I want to move to a couple of questions that came in specifically for Jon around the purchase decision journey. And one of my takeaways, I think, relates to a couple of these questions is as intuitive as the notion of the job to be done, we don't want a quarter-inch drill, we want a quarter-inch hole. When it comes to the decision journey, it's not just about the outcome, it's about how you got there, too. We don't just want the quarter-inch hole, we want to get there in a way that meets our other needs. So questions have been asked then about Do you think this applies to services broadly? Your examples, were shopping, and I think good examples of the way that the constrained shopper has to interact in the store environment and so forth. But would you maybe extend some of your insights to services more broadly?
Yeah, so regarding the buyer's journey portion of it, right, the way I would look at it is the job, so to speak, that the purchasing process or the buyer journey is trying to accomplish is to help a buyer research, evaluate, and purchase a product, right? And understanding that buyers will go through each one of those phases to try to solve their problem, right? And taking the stance of, and I'm being very, very careful with my words here on purpose, is to say we're trying to help a buyer solve a problem. And we as marketers should look at it that way, right? Instead of us saying that we have a message and you need to hear it, and we have this product or service that you should buy from us, we should understand what problems they're trying to solve, and then understand where they're going out there for information. So what I didn't dig deep into, and what I hinted on it is, customers are going out there looking for information to solve their product or service, right? Let's understand where they're having those conversations. If it's a B2B purchase, right? What white papers are they downloading? What forums are they looking at? Are they going to like Forbes.com? Are they going to CMO.com? Are they going to Mashable? So where are they going for that information search, and provide them that information? And then when you move to the evaluation phase of it, right? Then that's when we would say the content that we would put out there starts to turn into a dialogue, right? So now that they feel like they've understood what the problem that they're trying to solve, what the metrics are out, or what the metrics are, right? Now let's try to understand where they're going to evaluate these products or services, right? Where do we put content out there on our own web pages that relate directly to what they're trying to solve? An easy example of how that can be done, and this applies to both the product and service, is in Google search words, right? So what are the key phrases that consumers are searching related to your product or service? And then if they find your landing page, make sure that your landing page provides information related to what they searched for. A lot of times we find that organizations just put generic landing pages related to any given search terms. So customize your landing pages and search terms related to which phase of the journey that they're trying to solve, whether it's information search and they're browsing, right? They're out there. This is the liken to, I'm in the shoe store and I'm just looking at the shoes. The sales associate comes up to you and says, hey, can I help you? And you say, no, thank you, I'm just browsing. We need to respect that in the digital world as well, to understand when a consumer is just browsing and when they actively want to engage us and talk to and try a shoe on. So we need to make sure that the information aligns to each phase of those parts of the journey. So to answer your question, I know I went a little bit deeper, but it does apply to both product and services. The classification that I would say is for the buyer's journey portion of understanding the key phases, it applies more and works better for considered or high involvement purchases.
So that's great. I want to come back to something you emphasized about midway through your talk, and it relates to the next question, and that is this notion of traditional demographics or segmentation not really being effective to determine what's needed at what point in the journey. And you made the point that the buyer type C, the constrained buyer, might be a time-constrained buyer in one context, but maybe an A buyer in another context. I think that's an important point, because as we have more continuous, discrete data about the decision purchase journey, online or wherever we're getting that data, it's becoming more and more apparent that it's very context specific. That we used to segment by traits and demographic characteristics because that was frankly the best we could do. So it relates to the next question. Then, are these segments that you've derived from this process themselves reasonably static, or does this evolve maybe even in the course of a single shopping trip or decision journey, that they might be constrained at one point and less constrained at another?
I would say that could definitely be the case, and I think the stance that organizations should understand is that yes, you can be an A buyer or a C buyer given the context and the situation. And you should prepare your buyer's journey to be able to handle both consumers. In addition to that, what we found is that segment C buyer is underserved. So if you're looking for some easy wins to improve your customer experience in the buyer's journey, focus on improving that journey for the segment C buyer. Because if we take the stance that I can be a segment A buyer and a segment C buyer at any given time, but when I'm a segment C buyer, I'm not very satisfied in my journey, but I'm now going to gravitate towards organizations and buyers' journeys that help me when I'm in need, right? We've all been there, whether it's a buying process or another situation. When I'm in an urgent mode and I need to do something very quickly, you end up building more loyalty to the individuals that help you in that time of need. So understanding that segment C buyer is underserved and focusing there and helping them, you're not only helping that segment C buyer, but you're helping all buyers, because those buyers could be at any given time an A, B, or C buyer.
Okay, that's great. I want to come back to Tony for this next question, and feel free to weigh in too, John. And Laura asked, what do you do in the situation where the consumer has stopped trying to do the job? They had inadequate means perhaps to do the job, and they've sort of given up on it. Can you re-engage them? How do you go about it if they aren't maybe actively seeking for a solution anymore, but there is in fact a solution for the job they wanted to have done?
Well, we certainly love opportunities like that, because that's an opportunity for brand new market. When people are struggling to get a job done, there's really no great solution out there. They've tried a few things, they gave up. But it doesn't mean they gave up on trying to get the job done. They're still trying to ad hoc piece it together and hoping someday someone will come up with a solution. And knowing where those other products failed, maybe they only got one step of the job done, where you need some critical mass, and it's very hard to just get one part of the job done and people flock to it. You got to get a good bulk of the job done before that happens. And this is the mistake a lot of companies make. They're not thinking through the job in the most effective manner. So I think that's and I'll give another example. There's some jobs that people have been trying to get done forever, like parents who try to pass on life lessons to their children. And there's really no great method for doing that. I mean, you try lots of little things, but even to this day, no one's really come up with a great solution that gets things performed. It doesn't mean the market doesn't exist. It just means there's a lot of frustrated consumers out there that are waiting for that will come along and get the job done a lot better. And that's where there's money to be made.
Tony, that's great. I want to come back to an earlier question I didn't get to, and Andreas had asked about distinguishing sort of between the levels of the jobs. You use the example of, making a cup of coffee in the morning can be defined as the job to be done, but in a wider context or a higher level view of that would be it's getting me started in the morning, it's, whatever. The classic example about the milkshake as a way to have nourishment while you're on the move, and that was one of the examples I think that maybe you and Clay have used. A little bit more about how do you determine at what level to view the job to be done? Maybe the job that wasn't done in this last example, they've moved on to another way of getting the higher order job done, and that, so they're drinking a Coke instead of coffee or something like that. So just a little bit about how you determine what level to look at the problem.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the answer is I'm going to look at it from two perspectives, the customers and then the companies. From the customer's perspective, they may be trying to get a broader job. They're trying to boil water, for example, but what's the higher level job? All right, they're trying to create a hot beverage for consumption. That makes sense, right? Now they've chosen to do that. Now they're looking for a solution that will help them get that job done. But let's say, again, you're the kettle maker, and you don't have software expertise. You don't write code. You don't build controls. You just perform all you do in your company. And then the question you're going to ask yourself from that side is, well, given that I only have this set of capabilities, do I want to attempt to try to get that broader job done? Surprisingly, a lot of companies will say no. And those are the companies that get disrupted, because someone will come across like Nespresso with a solution that does get the entire job done on a single platform. So what we try to do is to encourage our clients to define the job from the perspective of the customer and reach to get there. But in a surprising number of cases, companies will say, we're not willing to go there. Let's just focus on making a better kettle so we can boil the water to the right temperature faster and within a more accurate range, as an example. But when you start defining it in an emotional state, you've gone too far. We always define the core job around a function, and then that core functional job becomes the center of the universe for that market, if you will. And then we define the emotional jobs, the related jobs, the consumption jobs around that core functional job. And we see a lot of companies making that mistake as well. They're conflating emotions with function and trying to blend it all together in a single job statement. But the single job statement is always that core functional job, and everything else is defined around it.
That's great. I want to just time for me one more comment from Jon to kind of paraphrase that question to him in the context that he talked about, which is the idea that there are these 15 stages, but you can sort of short circuit that or condense it for the given buyer. So any thought again about how to view the sort of level of what the job is to be done? Is in the case you use, is the job to be done getting home in time for dinner? Is it picking up the kids? Is it, how do you, across the decision journey, how do you think about how to help the consumer achieve their overarching job?
Yeah, so it starts with the buyer trying to solve a problem, right? And we as marketers should view that as understanding what that problem or situation is and helping them to research, evaluate, and purchase a product or service to help them solve that problem. So if I had to summarize it in that short of a statement, right, is understanding what they're trying to solve, what is that problem or the situation that they're trying to accomplish. And then our job as marketers developing the buyer's journey is to help them research, evaluate, and purchase a product, right? And do it in a way that they feel very confident leaving the journey, right? Making them feel as if, they had all the information they needed and they bought the best product that they possibly could have purchased to solve their problem.
Okay, well, that's a great note to end on. Thanks again to both of you. To our audience, if the speakers didn't get to your questions or there are additional things you would like to discuss, we do invite you to reach out to Jon at jonathan.dome, D-O-M-E, at hartehanks.com, and to Tony at Ulwick, U-L-W-I-C-K, at Strategyn, S-A-R-A-T-E-G-Y-N.com. And again, I'm sure that there will be some follow-up, and thanks to the audience for your attention and your questions. Our next webinar will be held January 31st at 1 p.m., and will feature Peter Verhoof and our own Kay Lemon. Many thanks to the members of the MSI audience for participating in our member-to-member webinar series, and we hope to see you at the next one.